For members of the public, we apologize. We were in executive session, so we're just going to be a few more minutes as council kind of gets comfy. All right, let's go ahead and get started. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Welcome to the April 17, 2018 Longmont City Council study session. Can we please start with a roll call? We'd like to welcome Michelle Gomez, who is riding shotgun over there. Here.
Here.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Do we have any motions to direct the city manager to add agenda items to future agendas? All right, great. Seeing none, let's go ahead and move on to public invited to be heard. Actually, let's rewind about 20 seconds. Mayor Pro Tem Christensen.
I don't know if this needs to be added to an agenda, but I would like, it's spring, and on days when it's not windy like this, it's perfect for helping humanity, Habitat for Humanity, build stuff. We could put our muscles where our mouth is, and it seemed to me, I participated in builds at Habitat, and I would like it if our city, as the city staff, and particularly the city council, would participate in a build with Habitat for Humanity, if that could be organized, if they want us. I think they would. So anyway, I would just like that to be something we might consider.
Do you want to reach out to them and ask? And
Sure.
then bring it back?
Sure. Okay.
Cool.
I'll
Then we
do
can, then we can kind of, that'll be the impetus to get it on.
that. Okay.
All right, anybody else? All right, seeing none, let's go ahead and move on to public invited to be heard. Ms. Paula Fitzgerald, welcome back. Can you really lean in there?
Am I in there? Okay. Hi, I'm Paula Fitzgerald, and I'm here representing the Zoning Code Committee of the Historic East Side. I live at 419 Emery Street, and I'm here to discuss the residential compatibility chapter of the draft development code. We are, and we will continue to be opposed to the minimal restricted zone and heights allowed in this chapter of the code. I've given you 3 documents that are in front of you as well as up on the screen for your review. The first is an updated copy of the Survey of Building Heights. On page 2, we've now added the average building height on Main Street between 3rd and 6th Avenue, which is 25 foot 6 inches. Of the 78 buildings found in this 3-block area, 90% of them are 35 feet or shorter. Page 3 shows the heights of the commercial buildings along Kimbark Street, again, all of which are below 35 feet, except for the tower on the Central Presbyterian Church. Homes on Emory are all less than 35 feet, and 70% of them are 25 feet or shorter. The new High Plains Bank addition is a compatible height and is less than 35 feet high. The second document, not going here. Okay, the second document is a sketch of a potential project at 420 Kimbark. This shows the 70-foot restricted height zone adjacent to residential properties. As you can see, there is no building planned within this restricted area. Parking and landscape strips are also required, so what is shown here is likely typical of future development proposals. What this has created is a transition zone area that does not affect building height in the least. This is not compatible. We believe the entire lot should be restricted by 35-foot building height, which is, again, at least 10 feet taller than most homes or other commercial buildings on Kimbark. The last document shows the height and massing difference between RSF and MUD zones. This shows a 45-foot building next to a maximum 35-foot building, or high homes. Height and mass must both be considered. Most homes have gabled roofs, while commercial buildings typically have a flat roof with walls straight up to the full height of the structure. Building mass at a 45-foot height is not compatible with our neighborhood. One of the goals of development codes is to provide a harmonious pattern of development and not impede quality of life for its citizens. Shadows from 45-foot high structures will be cast over entire yards, affecting gardens and outdoor structures, outdoor enjoyment. This is not compatible. Main Street should be home to the tallest and most massive buildings in the MUD zone. To allow those same heights in the transition area detracts from the downtown area in scale, mass, and intensity of use. There are many Main Street buildings that can be vertically expanded to provide additional square footage and support a distinct and vibrant downtown. Commercial buildings on the east side of Kimbark are all 35 foot or shorter. It's been compatible for years, and if adopted in the new code, will continue to be harmonious in the future.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. John Coe.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to speak briefly on the item that came before you last week on the HIPAA. It caught my attention because I work in the industry. I've worked in medical records for a long time, and it seems like just hiring an attorney to work for the city at $500 an hour. I'm not sure if this fills a particular need, but the city works in many information technology areas, and it seems like this might be kind of an overgeneralization. Cambridge Analytica calls this kind of information personal identifiable information, and that's kind of one of the things that HIPAA sometimes represents. So I just, when people start talking these 3-letter and 5-letter acronyms, and they start talking $500 an hour lawyers, it kind of catches my attention because that's $2,000, you know, for just to talk to these lawyers at some point, you know. So the city's in the information business, since we're selling internet information for people. Some of this stuff crosses over, so this caught my attention, and so I just wanted to kind of discuss this with the council and mention this, that just hiring more lawyers and having more lawyers talk about things is maybe a substitution for you guys being able to make the right decisions at times. I'm not sure why this particular thing came up, but I did get the communication that came from this law firm to the city. It looks like somebody's soliciting the city, as opposed to the city going out and looking for information. So I'm not sure, but I just wanted to make a comment on this, and I thank you all for your service to the city. Thank you.
Ruby Bowman.
Hi, my name is Ruby Bowman, 1512 Left Hand Drive. Longmont residents are fortunate, as one could even say we are blessed to have wonderful natural areas. We have productive open space agricultural properties and wildlife habitat that have been preserved through open space acquisitions. And we have beautiful greenways, stream corridors, nature areas like Rogers Grove. And these areas are highly valued public amenities. And a lot of taxpayer money has been invested to purchase and maintain these areas for their attributes and for residents to enjoy. As private development intensifies within Longmont, it's imperative the city allows residents ample opportunities to weigh in on proposed private development plans for property sites adjacent to public amenities like our greenways and nature areas, among others. As it stands now, the city requires notification of property owners residing within a set number of feet of a proposed development. This is not adequate, considering many residents who use the greenway or nature areas and who are the true property owners of these amenities live in other parts of the city and may not learn of the proposed developments until it's too late to provide input. Longmont residents paid for many of the public amenities we enjoy today, so they should have a greater say in what is being built in close proximity to these highly valued areas. The city should also provide an ample amount of time for the public to submit comments. A concerted effort should be made by the city to get the word out about proposed developments next to city amenities. Publish a notice in the utility bill newsletter and in the local newspapers. Set up a city email notification system for these type of development applications. Place an announcement on the Nextdoor website. These are a few suggestions. I know the city has a development log one can refer to, but the log can be confusing and you have to keep track of new developments being added to the log. I live in Southmore Park, which is nowhere near the St. Vrain corridor, nor is it within the current notification zone. And I would like to be notified a development application for sites near the St. Vrain corridor or Rogers Grove without having to drive up and down streets looking for city signs or constantly reviewing the log hoping I didn't miss a development of interest. Please fix the problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Bowman. Sherry Malloy.
Good evening, Mayor Bagley and City Council members. My name is Sherry Malloy, 2113 Rangeview Lane. I attended the Land Development Code Update Community Meeting at the museum last week. The presentation and process were very helpful. As you know and we'll be discussing this evening, this is the first phase of the update, which addresses things like development procedures, zoning districts, etc. The next phase, addressing riparian species and habitat protection, is the section Stand with Our St. Vrain Creek and our 13 co-signers spoke to in the letter you recently received. In that letter, we identified 7 recommendations we're hoping will be included to improve protection of our riparian areas. By the way, while our letter said 70% of species depend on riparian areas for their survival, we recently learned that percentage is more like 80 to 90%. It's essential we protect these critical and highly sensitive areas that make up less than 2% of Colorado. Regarding the first phase of the development code updates, I wanted to give a shout out to staff for including language requiring equal space for trash, recycling, and composting when new multifamily units are built. This is an important first step because the city does not do collection to most MFUs. Requiring commercial haulers provide these services to all MFUs needs to be the next step. Only then will people residing in apartments and townhomes have the same opportunities to participate in waste diversion efforts as people in single-family homes. Finally, like Ruby, I'm hoping you might direct staff to make an addition to this first phase in the section addressing notification of development proposals. Please include specific language that would afford all residents ample opportunities to review plans and give input regarding private development plans in close proximity to areas like open space properties, Union Reservoir, Ham Park, and our St. Vrain and left-hand greenways. Including language requiring a robust citywide notification process will help ensure that everyone in Longmont who is interested have a voice regarding future development near our rich public natural places. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Malloy. Bob McLaughlin.
Good evening, Mayor Bagley, members of council, and city staff. I'm here tonight. My name is Bob McLaughlin. I live at 620 Emery Street in the historic East Side, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the historic East Side neighborhood. We want to thank the city council, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and especially the city staff for their work on the Land Development Code. As the area down in the interface between downtown and the East Side develops with additional intensity, one of our areas of concern is the parking situation. Now, that's not in the document that you're going to be considering tonight, but it is an issue that will come up in the future. Some blocks along Emery Street already have a parking problem during the daytime, and as more employees and more customers are attracted to our lovely downtown, that problem will only get more severe. So we look forward to working with council and staff to help find solutions for these problems in the future, and we hope that that in a project in a not too different future, we can look at solving parking issues between downtown and adjacent neighborhoods on either side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Mr. Strider Benston, you are called to the podium.
Swiftly as usual. Strider Benston, 951 17th Avenue, Mayor Bagley, Council. I think I'm going to pull a Stan Toll on you tonight, and instead of talking about the great beyond, kind of have to deal with myself. 10 days ago, it snowed, and so I actually drove my car for the first time in months. And with all of my stress, I was a week late in getting the license updated, so they pulled me over. And then they stole my driver's license. They said, well, you didn't pass the test. Well, that's really strange, because I went down in October, and I passed the test, and they signed it, and they took my picture, and they mailed me my license, and I haven't driven hardly since then, so I have no incidents. So how could that be? I've talked to a couple of attorneys. They've never heard of it before. But we have El Presidente, to whom no laws apply, and in my case, they make up new ones. Like the first time I ever entered a courtroom in my life, 53 years ago in Selma, Alabama, I was convicted for sitting on the white folks' side of the courtroom. And then when I applied for a job as a census worker in 2010, 45 years later, they said, oh, you can't have a job because you've been convicted of a crime for sitting on the white folks' side of the courtroom. So anyway, life is kind of difficult, and thanks to Edwina Salazar, at least we can eat in this town. Although they cut off my electricity a couple of days ago, and when they keep hitting you 1,000 different ways, there's no possibility of catching up. So that's just kind of what our world is dealing with, and even though I'm not allowed to teach because I have a master's degree in philosophy and history and political science and humanities, at least the teachers are going down and trying to get a fair treatment out of our society, even though we have Tabor that says they aren't allowed to have a decent work life. Thank you much.
Thank you, Strider. Scott Stewart.
Mayor Bagley, members of council, Scott Stewart, 229 Grant Street. Obviously, airport Obviously, I'm bothered on weekends by the repetitive airport activity. The idea that the airport is an economic engine for the city is a common narrative used by those that have an interest in acquiring funding to support an airport. This is done all over the country. It's kind of an FAA tactic. I have yet to find hard numbers to back up this claim when it pertains to the city. There are many economic engines in the city that don't create the increasing negative impact that is being caused by the airport. This airport didn't build the city. The city built the airport. Is a larger airport really necessary for economic growth in the city? The truth is the city will continue to grow whether the airport is here or not. And I'm not saying to get rid of the airport, but you just don't need to increase it. What has the increase in air traffic done to benefit the homeowners, the people that have invested in this town? Stop trying to increase the size and activity of the airport at the expense of the rest of the town. We as homeowners have invested our money, our lives here. Stop infringing on that. What's wrong with those who are like myself, do not wish to be intruded on? Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Stewart. All right, that will conclude our first call public invited, actually our only call public invited to be heard. Is there anyone else that wants to say anything since we don't have a second? All right, seeing none, let's go on to our special reports. Let's go ahead. We have a couple proclamations. Is there someone here to receive the Fair Housing Month proclamation? All right, come on down. I'll go ahead and read the proclamation, and then you guys can say a few words, and then you can get your picture taken with City Council. Highlight of the year for you folks. All right. I'm just still young enough that sometimes I need them and sometimes I don't, but all right. A proclamation designating the month of April 2018 as Fair Housing Month in Longmont, Colorado. Whereas April 2018 marks the 50th anniversary of the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968, which affirms the right of every citizen to obtain housing of their choice, regardless of race, color, sex, religion, national origin, disability, or family status. And whereas State of Colorado law also affirms the right of every citizen to obtain housing of their choice, regardless of race, color, creed, religion, sexual orientation, national origin, disability, marital status, or family status. And whereas these laws prohibit discrimination and harassment in all aspects of housing, including sales and rentals, evictions, terms and conditions, mortgage loans and insurance, land use and zoning, and are a vital part of ensuring Longmont is a welcoming and inclusive community where everyone can belong. And whereas we recognize the importance of fair housing education and the City of Longmont's efforts to further fair housing for all, now therefore I, Brian J. Bagley, Mayor by virtue of the authority vested in me, and the City Council of the City of Longmont do hereby proclaim April 2018 is Fair Housing Month in Longmont. So thank you for coming to accept this. Do you have a few words you'd like to say?
Yes, thank you so much. Good evening, Mayor Bagley and council members. My name is Adriana Perea, a Community Relations Specialist in the Office of Community and Neighborhood Resources for the City of Longmont. I also work alongside the amazing Susan Spalding and Carmen Ramirez. Longmont has a strong commitment to fair housing, which is equal opportunity for all. The Fair Housing Act turned 50 years old last week. It is an effort to end one of the most horrendous forms of discrimination. In 2005, the city made that commitment by starting a fair housing program within the Office of Community and Neighborhood Resources. Under this program, the city offers education to employees, community members, training to landlords and tenants, and work with the Colorado Civil Rights Commission to review complaints and provide assistance with fair housing issues like predatory lending and housing discrimination. In order to further the respectability of Longmont's landlords, Community and Neighborhood Resources, partnered with Longmont's Police Crime-Free Housing Program, continues to sponsor the monthly Longmont Landlord Training Alliance. This has been in effect since 2011, and every year in April, the Landlord Training Alliance does a fair housing training. Last week, we trained over 70 landlords in fair housing. This program provides information to landlords with the goal of creating less conflict and more engagement around fair housing, which lays the foundation for building an integrated community. Due to racial discrimination, the gap between most Anglo families in America owning a home compared to that of Latinos and African Americans is a wide disparity. Half a century later, we, as a nation, still have a far way to go. For this reason, it is crucial for divisions like community and neighborhood resources to exist. Again, there is still a lot of work to be done, and with the housing crisis we are seeing, the average age of a homeless person in America is 9 years old. Community and neighborhood resources continues to provide fair housing and equal opportunity programs, guidance and referrals for tenants, landlords, realtors, and answering questions for community members that have fair housing concern. Equal access to rental housing and homeownership opportunities is the foundation of federal housing and the foundation of Longmont's fair housing commitment. This proclamation is an acknowledgement of Longmont's uncompromising promise that no individual in Longmont will be denied to access to housing because of their race, religion, color, national origin, sex, familial status, disability, ancestry, creed, belief system, marital status, or sexual orientation. Thank you.
Anything else? Well, picture time. All right, let's go, council. It's always good to see fellow law school classmates. All right, one more proclamation. Is somebody here to receive the Longmont restaurant with, of course. Why don't we go ahead and move on to the next order of business? Welcome, Scott.
Thank you.
Let me go ahead and read the proclamation, and you can
Just stand here.
you can say some stuff.
All right.
All right, here we go. This is a proclamation designating the week of April 20th through 29th, 2018 as Longmont Restaurant Week in Longmont, Colorado. Whereas the Longmont Area Chamber of Commerce with Advanced Longmont Partners, Longmont Economic Development Partnership, Longmont Downtown Development Authority, and Visit Longmont have organized the first ever Longmont Restaurant Week scheduled for April 20th through April 29th, 2018. And whereas food and brewery establishments have rapidly grown in number in Longmont during the last few years, the Advanced Longmont Economic Partners are highlighting the economic impact and the cultural enhancement the culinary arts bring to Longmont. And whereas approximately $1 in $4 spent at restaurants is a direct result of travel and tourism, Longmont Restaurant Week will bring regional recognition to local food businesses, but also the community at large. And whereas Longmont restaurants employ 4,911, not approximately, 4,911 people, creating significant economic impact with jobs providing employment for a wide range of residents, from a high school student's first job to a new immigrant opening a new business. Now, therefore, I, Brian J. Bagley, Mayor, by virtue of the authority vested in me, and the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim the week of April 20th through 29th, 2018 as Longmont Restaurant Week in Longmont, and I invite all area residents to participate by dining at the 43 participating venues listed at longmontrestaurantweek.com. Just in case there was a glitch in the telecast tonight, longmontrestaurantweek.com. Mr. Cook, would you like to say something?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley and members of City Council. My name is Scott Cook. I'm with the Longmont Area Chamber of Commerce, and I'm joined tonight by some of our economic partners. Ariel with the Longmont Economic Development Partnership is here with us. I believe Nancy Rizak may be here. maybe she's here, with Visit Longmont, and Colin with the Longmont Downtown Development Authority. Also, Brian Berry, the chair of our chamber board, and Carmen Sample, one of the owners at Sample's Bistro, is here tonight with me. Cities across the nation host restaurant weeks, and we've all taken note of the fast-growing culinary and brewery scene in Longmont, as you mentioned, and we believe it is time now for Longmont's very own Restaurant Week. Restaurant Week was the idea of Carmen Sample and Teresa McPhail at Max Place. And our chamber staff, led by our new event director, Leah Winkler, have been hard at work with all of our economic partners and over 40 restaurateurs and breweries to make this an event and a week that Longmont can be proud of. Restaurants and breweries, as you mentioned, contribute quite significantly to our local economy. As you mentioned as well, almost 5,000, so we'll get there, are employed in these businesses, and they play a large part in creating our local culture and what makes our community unique. So again, we'd like to welcome all Longmont residents and visitors to check out longmontrestaurantweek.com. You can see a full list of participating venues there and menus that are priced at $18.71. $18.71 was the year that Longmont was founded. And we believe everyone will find a chance to celebrate Longmont Restaurant Week beginning with us, or beginning this week on Friday the 20th and going through the 29th. Thank you.
So 43 restaurants offering meals for $18.71 to be found at longmontrestaurantweek.com.
That's right.
Why don't you go ahead and
That is
ask
the
your
right
partners
address.
to come up and
All
let's
right.
take a picture.
Thank you.
Oh, you want more time? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Just a bit more time. Mayor and members of City Council, I neglected to mention our King of the Can contest, which is taking place on Wednesday, the 25th, one of the sub-events to Longmont Restaurant Week at Marco's Pizza. And this is a donation for the Hour Center, and there's a contest between Mayor Bagley, Brian Berry, and me.
It's eating.
To see who can collect the most cans for the Hour Center. And I just wanted to announce that everyone here in this room is on my team and will be collecting cans for me. Thank you.
But at the end, ultimately, it's who eats most wins. I just want to underscore that point for the Las Vegas odds makers. All right, let's go ahead and move on to our study session items. Let's go ahead and move on to section 5A, the 2020 census introduction and the role that our city, actually not even the role, just how it impacts our city. Erin?
Good evening, Mayor Bagley, members of council. Erin Fosdick with the Planning and Development Services Department. Tonight I'm joined by Carmen Ramirez from Community and Neighborhood Resources, as well as Sunny Subia from the Census Bureau. And I'll ask Sunny to come down in just a second. He'll be providing a presentation to council tonight that really gives an overview of the 2020 census. It's obviously 2018 now, but we're already preparing for the 2020 census. As you can imagine, there is a lot of work certainly that the Census Bureau does to prepare for the census, but also that the Census Bureau relies heavily on its partners, of which the city is one to accomplish. And so we'll give you a quick overview of some of the things that we do, particularly highlighting the efforts of a complete count committee. And we're hopeful that Longmont will again have a complete count committee. We have had one at least for the past 2 censuses. I can't say that I've gone back further than that to study it, but Sonny may know that. I'm sure he has all the records. Our participation rate, as he'll mention, was higher than the state, the county, and the nation, in large part to the work of some of our great community partners in 2010. And so we hope to replicate that this year. There's some additional challenges this year that Sonny will mention and we can talk more about, but we're hopeful that by starting early, by utilizing the great partnerships that we have at the city, that we'll be able to make this a great census as well. So with that, I'll invite Sonny to come down. He'll give a presentation, and then Carmen, and I can take any questions that you might have.
What was your last name, Sonny?
Subia.
Subia. Well, welcome,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Subia.
I might need to borrow Mayor Bagley's glasses.
Just click. Well, I'd like to thank you, Honorable Mayor and Council. This is my third census, and I had the opportunity to work in 2000, 2010, and now 2020 with the City of Longmont. And I do want to congratulate you on 2010, that you did receive one of the highest honors that the Census Bureau does give out to different communities for your response rate and the increase. One of the strategies that we figured had a lot of help in pushing that response rate was your complete count committee. Why do we do the census? The census is an act of Congress. It's in the Constitution. It's the only thing that the Constitution mandates that every person in the United States participates in. One of the main reasons that they do the census is for apportionment. This is one of the things that the elected officials look at. If you look at in 2010 with the census numbers, the political arena did change. A lot of the cities that gained or states was Arizona, Nevada, Texas gained 4. And if you look, New York lost 2, Ohio lost 2. So there was some movement, some transient movement throughout the country. Right now, Colorado looks to gain 1, and Montana. So we don't know where they're going to come from, but it's going to be paramount that they focus on strategies and push people into responding here in Colorado. Governor Hickenlooper has already set up a statewide complete count committee that will be helping with the statewide awareness campaign. And ensure your fair share of dollars, and I wish that was a little bigger. But if you look on the screen, for every person that responds to the census, your community receives $1,481, and that's just on an average. Different cities have different averages. Longmont would probably be a little higher, closer to $1,800. So with those numbers, when you start to count what it looks like if you are undercounted and you miss 200 to 300 people, and you add that out over 10 years, because the census happens only once every 10 years, you're going to be losing quite a bit of money. The Census Bureau has priority cities over 5,000 people, and I tend to disagree with that. I think priority cities are the cities that it would be more of an impact on those cities to lose 300 than if a big city like Houston or New York lost 500 people. So the little communities, Eaton, Colorado, Alt, Berthoud, those communities, it's more important for them to make sure that everyone in their community is counted. In the decennial census, we will conduct the census of population and housing. What I like to tell people is the census really is a housing count. And your GIS folks have already been working on some operations, local update of census addresses. They've been going through all of your records, updating your census addresses, and sending them to the Census Bureau what we will do is we will tabulate our maps and your maps to make sure that we have every household. Right before the census, we'll have one final annexation program to make sure that we have everything, and then it's to the census, and that's where it happens very, very fast. The census data is used for apportionment, draw congressional districts, enforcing voter rights, distribute $680 billion to communities, inform planning decisions for federal, tribal, state, and local governments, and inform organizations on where organizations or businesses on where to move their businesses to. 500 is a threshold for a lot of restaurants, national restaurants. They use the 50,000 to move into different communities. So they're looking at census data to move into different areas. And if there's growth of more than 25,000, they'll also move into some of those areas. And Longmont has been growing, and so we're excited about hopefully encouraging you to set up another complete count committee, hopefully as successful as it was in 2010. What's new with the census? Back in Census 2010, we had the American Recovery Act. That was President Obama. We had some money. We tried to kickstart the economy back. He bailed out some banks and some, but what he did also do was he provided $4 billion to the census to hire folks. And those folks were hired in the local community where they worked and where they spent their money. And what he was hoping with the American Recovery Act with the census was that they would kickstart the economy in those local communities, from the smallest towns to the biggest cities. Well, in 2020, we're not going to have that American Recovery Act money. We've actually been cut. We've been cut from 500 census offices to 248. So we will be almost a quarter of our operating budget from 2010 to conduct Census 2020. That's where the communities become involved. What we're doing different, hopefully to help oversee some of those shortfalls, is there are going to be 3 ways to self-respond. This is going to be the first census where we will be able to self-respond on the internet with a PIN number that you will be receiving in the mail. You can respond by the internet, by the phone, or with the regular paper questionnaire that normally we would do back in 2010 and 2000. What happens if we don't hear from you off the internet, the phone, or paper? Then we send people to the household, and that's the most expensive and operation that we do, because we have to send a person to that household that hasn't responded 6 times before we talk to a neighbor or someone that knows who's in the house. So what we do is we're going to try to have those local communities and complete count committees push the residents into responding by internet or phone. That's the cheapest way to do it. We will not have to come back to their home. So that's going to be one of our strategies. Key collection data, in-office address canvassing, that's what we're doing. That's going to be the first one. What we'll do is we'll look at some of our maps, and instead of sending people out to a map spot, certain areas like downtown Longmont that we know hasn't changed, we will not send people in there. We'll use the old records. So we'll try to save money that way. Our regional census offices will open in April. Early address canvassing will begin in April. The census offices in Denver will open in mid-2019. Then we will work on group quarters, and that's colleges. College students are probably one of the toughest to capture because they're moving, and it's their first census, and they think that they are counted at home when they're actually counted in the community that they live in. So a lot of the big universities and some of the community colleges, we'll do an early census operation to capture those college students. Then the big one, non-response, if they don't respond by internet, phone, we'll send someone to their house. And that is the most expensive operation that we do. Once the data collection is complete, we'll send some people out there to make sure that all the data that we've tabulated is accurate, and then it goes to the president's desk on December 31st. And how are we going to do it this time without the American Recovery Act? We're hoping to encourage some grassroots organizations and enroll community partners to increase the participation for those less likely to respond. Some of those populations that are less likely to respond or are not counted are children. Some parents forget to put them down on the form. They just put the adults, and children are always overlooked. What these complete count committees are is a group of trusted voices, businesses that'll bring resources to the table, and media, educational folks that you can reach down deep into the grassroots and make sure that we educate the folks on the importance of the census. Then we hope that by doing some events that you encourage them to respond on April 1st, which is Census Day. They should have already received their questionnaire in the mail. Hopefully that the Census Complete Count Committee will have events to help encourage. And I came to a couple of events in 2010 that Longmont did sponsor, and they were fantastic. It was a cross-section of the whole community, and everybody was having fun. And this is a way to get the whole community involved. It crosses all political boundaries, socioeconomics. It's important to the whole community. Mayor up in Gillette, Wyoming, he was a golfer. We were talking about his census count. And he says, so if someone responds to the census, that's like writing the city a check for $1,400. I had never thought of it that way, and I said, I'm going to steal that. I'm going to steal your material. But what he said was, we're going to take a picture of a big golf check with the person that uses those facilities, and we'll highlight someone that's in the WIC program or someone in the Head Start program. We'll highlight those folks on why is it important to them, and that this is their way of giving back to their community and not taking. And it was a great campaign in Gillette, Wyoming. And then we hope to engage those organizations to reach out to those hard to count groups. And there's going to be one group that's going to be very difficult, and that's the Latino groups, because of the governmental climate that is happening now. A lot of them are going to be less likely to respond because they're afraid of deportation. They're afraid that they will give their information and it'll be used against them, which is totally not true. The census is totally confidential. We do not use any of the information that we capture for any of our agencies. The president can't even call and ask for information from the census, and that was what am I trying to say? It was a
Safeguard put into the law.
It was put into the law by the courts. The Supreme Court ruled on that in 2000, that the president can't ask for anything. How are we going to do it? The census staff, what we will do is we'll provide partnership specialists such as myself, tribal specialists. We're going to have a national media campaign and national partnerships with some of the big Walmarts, Coca-Cola, Kellogg's that'll be helping us raise awareness. And then what do we do locally? And I think the most important thing is provide those trusted voices. Those are those people that can go out into the community and they are trusted. And the community will believe and trust their guidance on how important it is to the community to respond to the census. And form And once again, the number one strategy is form a state complete count committee. And like I said, you guys were nationally recognized in 2010. And provide local resources for your tailored promotion. And like I said, we will not have any of the funding to help, but what we're recommending is foundations, banks, different folks that can bring different resources to help with the complete count. And I know that Tucson has, they are going to give 25 cents for every person in their community for a complete count as far as their account to run a complete count committee. The State Complete Count Committee is being organized right now by Governor Hickenlooper. And I have met with Carmen and Aaron, and we've talked on the preliminaries about what a complete count committee looks like. But I just want to say you're in great hands because they were your liaisons to the complete count committee from the city in 2010. So they know what they're doing, and they did an outstanding job in 2010. So I'm really excited about being back to Longmont, and it's going to be fun to see what you come up with this time, because you did some things in 2010 that we use nationally. Oops. One of the things that they will have at their access, the Complete Count Committee, is an address mapper. And if you look at the dark areas of this map, those are the least likely to respond. We will have a real-time map that shows what the response rate looks like day to day. And those complete count committees can look at it every morning, find out where they're having a slow response, and centralize their efforts to some of those areas. And if you do set up a complete count committee, I will be back and do some training for that complete count committee on the mapper, how to use it and how to be successful. So what is the mayor's checklist, Mayor Bagley? Take a leadership position on census. Help your constituents understand the importance. Sponsor a proclamation. Let them know that you are going to do whatever it takes to make sure that you have a complete count and that you do receive your fair share of federal dollars in Longmont. Encourage your governor. The governor doesn't need any encouragement. He's on his way now. Support funding efforts for census outreach in your city. Support census recruiting. We will be hiring about 200 people in the Longmont area to do the count. So we are going to need to have some recruiting efforts to hire, because the unemployment rate in Colorado is one of the lowest in the country. So it's going to be very difficult to find people to work the census because it's part-time. Help your city promote it. Identify key leaders in education, health, philanthropy, corporations, faith-based organizations, and community-based organizations, and schedule a complete count committee training. And that's what I will be coming back to do. But it's not often that a sitting mayor has the opportunity to help oversee a census. And not every council gets a chance to help make sure that the community is set for the next 10 years. So it'll be, like I said, it's going to be fun to see what Longmont does, and I'm here to help in any way that I can.
Quick question. So this mayor's checklist, it's 2018. When is the appropriate time to start doing these things?
Right away.
So like a proclamation immediately?
Yeah, proclamation as soon as you can. What Aaron and Carmen, what we have discussed about setting the council, recruiting some of the complete count members, and then coming back and doing a training for them. Before you know it, we're going to be having people in the field working on map spotting houses, upgrading the census maps. And so there'll be people out there. People are going to start to hear about the census soon. So it's never too late. One of the things about why we started early was because we wanted to make sure that we give those cities plenty of time to design and develop strategies that work for their communities. Not every community is the same, and that's why we highly recommend that you bring those trusted voices.
If you could wave a magic wand and you decide, when would you want to have that community training?
Because I'm going to be doing it.
No,
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, because
No.
you're doing it, because you're the expert,
Right.
When would it be most effective?
I would say probably the end of next month,
So the end of May.
The end of May, early
Okay.
May, June.
Okay, Councilmember Peck?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Sonny, how many people are usually on this committee?
It depends on what kind of subcommittees you want to develop. There could be an outreach to the Veterans Committee. I know up in Montana, they have a Veterans Committee because they are one of the leading states for veterans retiring up in Montana. You could have a media camp subcommittee. You could have an education subcommittee, a banking, business subcommittee. Just depending on what area you want to focus on. In Greeley, I'll just share a quick story with you. I live in Greeley, and I was a team leader for the government team. Greeley had one of the lowest responding block areas in the country. So I asked the Census Bureau if I could work that area. What we did is exactly what the complete count committees are going to be doing with that area mapper. And that's what gave them the idea for the mapper, was we analyzed that area. What we found out was that area was single female head of households with children under 12. They were in poverty, and they were Spanish speakers. So what we did in Greeley, it was a councilman's idea, they adopted a mascot. And the mascot was Honey the Bee, be smart, be counted. The bee went to every school in that area and put a sticker on those kids on Census Day. It was like I vote. The sticker said, "Have I been counted?" That census block went from the lowest to the biggest increase in response rate in the country, and it was picked up by the media on how did they do that. It was simple. We used the kids, and it was a mascot that cost the city $600.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
For $6, we could probably count we could paint
Well,
Dr. Waters like a bee and send him back to
We
school.
lent the bee to UNC, to the college, and I don't know what they did with it that weekend, but we didn't ask.
Okay. And then all right, is there anything else?
No, I'm here to answer questions. And like I said, Aaron and Carmen were critical in the Complete Count Committee in 2010.
Councilmember Finley?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Little known fact, in 1980, I was one of the people who knocked on the doors and did the census here in Longmont. And it was really a lot of fun. I think I got paid for it, though, but not very much money.
Oh, no. I have the pay scale for Colorado. It's going to be over $15 an hour.
Yeah.
So it pays very well, and it's great for seniors. It's great for college students because those operations, they'll open and then they'll close.
Right.
And they'll
It
have
was
2
a
weeks off.
finite time. It was a lot of fun.
And then you'll come
Yeah,
back.
yeah. And thanks for what you do.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, folks.
Councilmember Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley.
Can you lean in there?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I wanted to ask, I've heard it stated both ways. Is a traditional census form going to be mailed to everyone, or is it only going to be mailed after people don't respond for a while?
No, every household will get the census form. In the form, it'll say that you have 3 ways to respond. You can respond, and you'll have a PIN. You'll go online, or you'll call it in, and what that PIN does, it identifies you in that household. Now, if you have dual households, like the snowbirds in Montana and North Dakota that live in Arizona, that's up to them to fight it out and to develop an awareness program on who's going to do the best job telling them where they live. And I see you say you belong in Longmont. What a great census logo or
Slogan.
the slogan that you have. But they choose because they self-respond where they feel that is their home if they have dual housing. But they only have one PIN. So once that PIN's taken up, the other housing is done.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be a PIN number that you'll call in and register.
Okay, so then the cost savings with the 3 ways to respond is to increase the efficiency of tabulation rather than
Right.
reduced mailing charges. or
And
anything.
sending back people to those houses. Because if they respond, it'll be easier to respond by phone or internet. And those that still feel that they like filling out the paper form, they'll still have an opportunity to do that. But what we're trying to do is push them into the responding by the internet because of how easy it is for them.
Thank you.
Councilmember Waters.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I'm just curious, the 2 ideas you've suggested, the golf check and the honeybee are both great ideas. Is there a database or a repository or a library that's been compiled of practices in cities that are higher than 77% response rates? So we could, of all the good things that happened in 2010, we can save some time by drawing from best practices or, proven practice somewhere else.
Well, actually, you probably have them on file here because the best practices would probably come out of Longmont because Longmont's increase in their response was higher than the state's increase. So some of the things that you did, I know I came up for an event where you had to the Hour Center, a bunch of your centers, they were, Carmen was, she helped coordinate those.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. So what we used was existing community events and then also created other events. We used our great Bailes de Mi Tierra, our senior center divas, and attracted families, and then we outreached to schools and partnered with folks, and that was where we were able to really get people to there. And I will tell you that I've already had conversations with community members who are concerned about responding.
Yeah.
So I've already started that baseline education.
Yeah, it's going to be a bigger challenge in 2020 than in 2010. So having our A game is going to be real important.
Absolutely, and that outreach and education as to what does that mean to you as a citizen or a member of our community, and what does that mean to our community and the loss of resources. So those conversations I've already had with some small groups that are concerned, as Sunny said, regarding immigration issues.
Can I ask just one more question?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
The online option or version may, at least it triggers for me and it may in others, questions about security. Given what's in the atmosphere right now about systems and hacking and all that kind of thing, what kind of claims can we make or assurances can we provide regarding the security of online responses?
Even in 2010, we were going to use the internet response, but it wasn't really as, we didn't have as many firewalls as we were hoping to in 2010. So we didn't do it then. But they've been working on it since 2010, and right now they are doing a test census in Providence, Rhode Island, for the to make sure that it is can't be compromised. So they've been working on it, and they've got different agencies, Homeland Security, FBI. We're using a lot of the census, and I know I have my census pin that it's really hard. I have to change my password every time I get into my computer. So it's changing all the time. And yeah, tell me about it. And
Mayor Pro Tem Christensen. Microphone.
Well, a lot of people in small towns, which there are a lot of in Colorado, only have a post office box, even though they have an address, but the post office doesn't deliver to their homes. So do you actually have their home address
Right.
But it goes to their post office box, and if they don't,
There are different types of
How do you
enumerations, and
figure that out?
that one would be update leave. What we would do in rural locations that have PO boxes, and sometimes those gang boxes up in the mountains where they have their mailboxes,
right,
we still have to go in and physically map spot those homes. So we'll be out in eastern Colorado, map spotting those homes and dropping off a questionnaire. So that's going to be update the address and leave the questionnaire. So every home will get one. Up in the mountains cabins, we'll be getting a questionnaire, and the marinas. Some people live on their
yeah,
boats.
yeah.
So we'll leave questionnaires on those boats. So anywhere anyone can live will receive a questionnaire. And you'd be surprised where people live.
yeah, that's amazing.
And we do have a very aggressive transient homeless count. That happens one night during the census, and it's one night, and that's the only night we count homeless because there's some transient. So
Yeah.
we'll have a big night. We'll contact the mayor so he can let the chief know that we're going to have people out there in the middle of the night walking around with flashlights looking for some homeless folks to count.
Very impressive, thanks.
One thing that I would recommend that, like, for example, I see 3 women in the audience, Sherry Malloy, Judith Blackburn, and Karen Dyke. They belong to a very, very effective group called Longmont Area Democrats, that they are just, would strike me if we're going to increase, that's Karen Dyke, by the way. So it would strike me that if we're looking at gaining one U.S. representative, that's probably going to be in the Denver metro area that tends to vote Democrat. And so you can...
It looks like it's
it
going to
would
be
be
in the
im-
Castle Rock area, yeah, south of Denver.
Yeah, so it's probably
Yeah.
it would probably be important. It's probably an issue that would impact
The Dems.
politics.
It
So,
will,
yeah.
it will, and that's why
It's important.
they're using the census as a political football right now. But it's our response is we're gonna have the best count we can.
Yeah. Well, my point is, there's
know.
nobody better than those 3 and their friends than
I'm
campaigning.
going to grab their card and
Yeah,
send
you
them
get
some
their card. Is
information.
what I'm saying.
Thanks, man.
All right. I don't know if they have cards. Although Karen Dyke might have a card. No. All right. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming.
Yes, and hopefully I'll be coming back up and conducting the training. So.
All right. Well, you have our commitment and my commitment specifically
Oh,
to
thank
help.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Should we take a 5-minute break? All right. Let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break. Then we'll come back. We'll talk about land development code. wrap this baby up, put her to rest. All right, everybody's in the room, so that's all right. Brian Schumacher, go ahead and let's introduce the next topic, and we'll get going.
All right, thank you, Mayor, council members. Brian Schumacher with Planning Development Services. Good evening. So to date, we've met with Planning and Zoning Commission 12 times and council 6 times on various topics related to the Land Development Code update. Good news is we're on the downhill side. We don't have too many more meetings. But we did want to just briefly stop by with council this evening and just let you know that based on the input that we received, not only from council and planning commission, but the public and other interested parties as well, is that we have a consolidated draft that's been prepared and it's out on the city website. We've been pointing people to take a look at that and provide any feedback that they have with respect to the consolidated draft. As noted in your communication, in addition to the consolidated draft that we're working towards adoption on, there are some additional amendments beyond this code update where there's several topics that we'll be looking at that were outside of the original scope of this particular code update, and those, as I mentioned, were identified in the council communication for potential future updates based on council, staff, and community input. A couple of examples are environmental protection sections, such as the riparian setbacks, habitat and species protection, also council's ongoing discussions regarding affordable housing are areas for future potential amendments to the code. And some of these items are related to current and future city work programs, and others would require additional policy discussion with city council in particular. And although our last major update to the Land Development Code was way back in 2001, obviously as trends change and community needs change, we've done amendments as needed. We've had a number of amendments that have occurred to the Land Development Code since 2001 based on changing community needs. Few examples are a few years ago we did some amendments to our parking standards, our landscaping standards, and as well as our development procedures in terms of organization and updates that felt that were needed at that time.
We're getting some signals that they can't hear.
Oh, I
For a second,
apologize.
I was like, people are waving at us, but no, they're just screaming to that microphone.
I apologize. So I will talk louder and closer to the microphone. So just a note, as you may have heard, last week we hosted a couple of community meetings down at the museum. There was about 50 folks that attended those meetings, and we provided an overview with respect to the consolidated draft, some of the major changes that were part of the update with the consolidated draft based upon the input that we received to date as part of the code update. We certainly just wanted to acknowledge and appreciate the input that we've received to date, not only from just general members of the public, but also members of neighborhood groups, environmental and sustainability interests, as well as business, real estate, and development interests that we've talked to, not only with the community meetings that were last week, but throughout this entire update process. It's been very helpful to get everybody's input as we've gone through this process. So this evening, we're not planning a detail. Obviously, we don't have any slides. We're not planning a detailed overview in terms of the code amendment at this time. But we are available to respond to any questions that council may have, just in case you've gotten a head start on looking at that document in terms of the consolidated draft. We will certainly copy council on the packet that we send out to the Planning and Zoning Commission. in case you're interested in looking at the communication, which will outline some of the major changes that are proposed with the update. It'll also include a summary of community comments that were received with respect to the update as well. And then beyond that, the next steps are next week we have a public hearing scheduled with the Planning and Zoning Commission on both the consolidated draft as well as the update to the official zoning map. And then the Planning and Zoning Commission will provide a recommendation on the land development code as well as the official zoning map to City Council. And then after that, we're planning to be back in May to City Council with the consolidated draft and the official zoning map for the council's consideration.
All right, well, I don't see anything in the queue, so I'm going to go ahead and ask a question. Now, typically when someone comes up to invited to be heard, there's a part of me that's always going, well, I mean, they don't know as much as our staff, right? They must not understand or something. In this case, Paula Fitzgerald was the one speaking, so, I mean, I'm going to give her a little bit more weight, Paula. So I guess my question is, we spoke, now all of a sudden everybody's in the queue. But continuing with my question, so the concern with, east downtown is their transition zone. I would take it one step further, and I voiced that I'd like to see transition zones in all neighborhoods, right? Council came back and said, or staff came back and presented a plan for addressing that. And my understanding was there was going to be a buffer zone as part of the transition zone, going from level height for X amount of feet and then being allowed to go one more story, right? So my question is, can you help me reconcile, did you listen to Paula Fitzgerald's comments during public invited to be heard?
Yes, I did, Mayor.
Okay, so I guess my question is she understanding it correctly? Have we addressed her concern? Have we not? Have we heard her and we're ignoring her? Are we? By the way, he just smiled. He joked back a laugh. I'd just like to know, what is your response to what she said during public invited to be heard? And I'm assuming she's representing several of the residents. So
obviously, we've heard a lot of comments from a variety of different interests with respect to this particular topic. It's residential protection standards, height transition in terms of you got the interface between a more intensive zoning districts such as the downtown district and the adjacent residential zoning districts. And so obviously we've heard from the Historic Eastside Neighborhood Group. We've heard from the Longmont Downtown Development Authority. We've heard, we've gotten some suggestions from our land development code consultants as well in terms of suggestions. Obviously, we were presenting some information, and I know it was late in the hour when we discussed this topic last month in March, I think the early part of March. And so we presented kind of what we've heard from the community. Obviously, Historic Eastside Neighborhood Group would like something different than what the Longmont Downtown Development Authority had proposed or suggested. And so we had come up with kind of a middle ground with respect to a proposal. Obviously, it doesn't meet what Historic Eastside Neighborhood would like to see, which their suggestion or recommendation would be that an entire lot that's immediately adjacent to their neighborhood not exceed the allowable height of their neighborhood. Whereas what was discussed with council last month was kind of a step up in terms of height. You'd have a certain distance. In the draft, it's 75 feet from the adjacent residential neighborhood. That would be similar or the same, not to exceed the residential district height. And then beyond that, it could step up another story for the next 50 feet. And so that was kind of the proposal and discussion that we had with council last month.
And that applies to all.
So that could apply not only in the downtown, but it could apply in other areas of the community where you have that interface between more intensive zoning districts and surrounding residential areas.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you. You're not first in the queue, but Councilmember Rodriguez, it is always a pleasure. So let's get you in here.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. First of all, I just kind of wanted, I know that you've answered this in an email, oddly enough, but there were concerns about artist studios and homes, and I think you're familiar with that. whereas they are being treated more as a home business in concept or home office type thing, where people were worried that it was going to be outright restricted in residential areas. And I've read the email, and I think you answered it well, but just to maybe get that on tape, if you will.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I know there was a little bit of confusion about what was being considered with respect to the code update. I will say that currently artist studios as a principal or predominant use currently aren't allowed in residential zoning districts. They are allowed as, for example, home-based businesses or home occupations. So if you're living in a home and have a artist studio and you meet our home occupation standards, that's perfectly fine. We're not planning to change that at all. What we're doing with this code update is that in several of the residential zoning districts, we are proposing to expand that to allow artist studios as a principal use in a couple of the residential districts, the residential mixed neighborhood and the residential multifamily neighborhoods, as kind of secondary uses where it may be appropriate and compatible with the surrounding residential uses. We weren't proposing with this code update to allow artist studios as a principal use, whereby they wouldn't need to be associated with a residence in the residential single-family zoning district.
All right, thank you. And then the other one I just wanted to address, because it was spoken about in public, invited to be heard tonight, the possibility of doing some sort of concept of notification for our residents when there's a development application adjacent to a public amenity or public lands. Obviously not as prohibitive, cost prohibitive as a mass mailing, but some sort of notification, as they were suggesting, such as within the city line or something along those parameters. What would be the likelihood of, or not the likelihood, but what could we do to address something along those lines?
Well, we do currently have standards regarding the mailed notice requirement, and it varies depending upon the type of application, whether it's a minor or major application. And it varies from 150 feet, basically adjacent, to 1,000 feet currently. There also are provisions in our current code, as well as being carried forward in our draft, whereby if there are developments that potentially have community-wide impacts or neighborhood impacts, that we have the ability to expand the notice area, the mailed notice area. We can certainly explore and discuss other options with respect to getting the word out in terms of development applications. As mentioned under Public Invited to be Heard, we do have an active development log that we update on a monthly basis that's posted on the city website that a lot of people utilize. But in terms of other avenues for getting the word out on development applications that are in process, we can certainly explore that. That may not be necessarily a written notice,
right,
but it could be some other option we could explore.
Okay. Because I do think that would be a benefit to our residents, especially when it's concerning, like I said, any development that's adjacent to basically public or publicly used land that we have in our city portfolio.
Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Rodriguez, Joni Marsh, Director of Planning and Development Services. So one thing that we have the fortunate luck to be getting is a staff resource that will be forthcoming to help us with public information and marketing and outreach. So one of the things that I'll be doing when that staff member comes on board is coming up with a kind of a marketing and outreach plan and how we get more things on the web and through CityLine. So I think that will be one of the things that we'll incorporate, and I'll talk to her about what are all the different avenues that we can start using that currently we don't have that particular resource to help keep us up on top of those things on a day-to-day basis, but hopefully in the next month we'll have something that could help with that.
Okay, and since you're up here real quick, Joni, sorry, just the last thing.
Last time I ever call on you. Jeez.
There's been some concerns from residents concerning the council's ability to have oversight over some of these developments versus planning and zoning's ability. And I know that some folks have had conversations with you that you have some strategies and ideas. And I was wondering if you could bring those to the table when we do the river, streams, and wetlands portion that's coming up in the future.
Yeah, Mayor Bagley and Councilmember Rodriguez, certainly I have been asked for all of council members edification. A couple of questions about how council might, say, have purview over variances to certain applications that right now through our process go to Planning Commission. So those would all require code changes to change how process and who is the oversight for those. There may also be ways that we address that through changing review criteria and making sure that what is in the review criteria that council is seeking is what Planning Commission then can review applications against. So certainly something in that next iteration, which I believe we're going to try to get started in probably July to take up the other pieces that Brian mentioned.
All right, thank you.
All right, Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I had a couple of quick questions for you. And thanks for all the public input that you guys have extended to the community. I think that's really important. Quick question though, under our new code, which zoning is it that we get to the 8 lots per acre, like what is in Envision Longmont?
So that would be under the residential single family. Envision speaks of density range of 1 to 8 units per acre for that residential single family neighborhood.
I see that, but I see that under residential single family, we still have the 50-foot lot minimum, and we still have all the landscaping requirements, so I'm not sure how we get 8 on there. I guess I just don't see it. If maybe in the future you could maybe draw a little map in there so I could see how that fits in there, because I just couldn't figure out how that would work.
We can certainly address that, and we'll mention that with the communication to the Planning Commission as well as
That'd be
City
great.
Council.
I'd love to see just how that all fits in together.
Sure. I mean, okay, sorry.
And I had some other questions. On page 167, 3A, the Roman numeral 5, it talks about landscape coverage. The landscape code to me is just kind of burdensome, especially when we're trying to encourage affordable housing. Let me get to the page there. Requires 75%. Am I on the right page? I'm not. 75% of the land to have ground cover that's irrigated. So that means that every lot has to have grass in it, on it. Is that correct? That's irrigated, that has a sprinkler system?
So most residential lots do have a requirement, but we can look at some options either through this process or
Xeriscaping just seems to be like a better alternative to that.
right.
Than to have grass on everything, and then also, gosh, there was another one where you have to have so many trees per lot. Yeah, that seems, yeah, it just seems kind of burdensome to me. And I know that when I bought my first house, which was a townhouse, it had no grass and it had no trees, but I could afford it. And we chose at that time to do some xeriscaping, and most of it was not irrigated, certainly not 75% of it. And that just seems like, it seems backwards to me, and it does not seem like a sustainable kind of Envision Longmont kind of thing. That concerned me. And then the other thing besides the landscaping that concerns me is the parking lot requirements. I had the privilege of going out to BC Services new building recently. It was 2 weeks ago, I think, and talking to the Betchers about how they went through the process and what they liked about it and what they didn't like about it. And they said nothing but wonderful things about our staff. but they said one thing that was really troubling to them was that the parking lot had to have all of these medians in it, so it was very difficult to remove snow in the wintertime. And in fact, in some places they couldn't remove the snow, and then the snow would melt and turn to ice. They had a woman who slipped and fell and broke her ankle, and then subsequently died of a blood clot from that accident. And they said that if, they understood, the need for walkways and lines in the parking lot, but these little buffers that have to come out make it impossible to do a good job in scraping off the snow, and really created a hazard in their parking lot, which is, right out in the open on the west side of their building. It's not like it's on the north side even. That concerns me because I see in our new code we still have all these little things that make it difficult to shovel snow. So I think we need to think about that as well, because that just broke my heart that would happen. Anyway, and next time we go to vote on anything or make decisions on this code, I really would like to have a hard copy, because this was very difficult for me to go back and forth and read on, but because I couldn't mark it up. And I like to mark things up. So that's another suggestion I would have next time this comes before us, and those would be my concerns. So thank you for all your hard work.
Before calling on the next person in the queue, do we have consensus to instruct council to maybe bring back an option for the landscaping or an appropriate zero-scape alternative? I mean, I've heard you mention it, I've heard Marcia mention it, I've heard Joan mention it, I've heard Polly mention it, and I've heard you mention trees. You don't like trees? Yeah, okay, she hates trees. So I guess what I'm saying is, do we want to, I didn't hear a motion, but. Well, it's a study session, but can we have that included, some options? And I'm seeing a head shake, a head up and down from.
If council wants us to include that in there, you can provide us direction so that we can work on that.
So Mayor Pro Tem leaned over and says, well, what does it mean by irrigated? I guess some clarity in what the options are. So the question was, does that mean irrigated or just watering and sprinkling like Mayor Pro Tem does with her house? And that's not a joke. That's what she said. I was just repeating what she said.
I mean, I will say on single-family lots, there's more leeway in terms of what people can do in terms of landscaping. They don't necessarily need to have, so for example, a single-family lot, they don't necessarily need to have an automatic underground irrigation system. They could have a zero-scape design. This typically more applies to multifamily and commercial type of developments. Okay. I will also mention that, as noted in the communication regarding future updates, particularly regarding our design standards and construction specifications related to public improvements, one of the areas that we want to look at in conjunction with that particular update, and also we've gotten some feedback from our sustainability staff, is regarding the whole notion about zero-scape landscaping standards, as well as low-impact design, whereby the issue regarding parking lot islands, instead of them being raised, maybe they're not raised, and that may be an area where it could be utilized for storm drainage, water filtration in parking lots, and that they could push snow into those areas as need be, as opposed to having raised curbs. So those are areas where we currently don't have extensive standards regarding zero-scape, and that's one area that we want to look at with respect to that next batch update on the design standards and construction specifications.
All right, great. Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I had many of the same concerns that Councilmember Finley has expressed very ably, so I won't go over them specifically the same ground, but I have two major concerns. One is, I wonder if we might have taken a step in the wrong direction, in a sense, in terms of generalizing transition zones. It seems to me that while the general plan for transition zones as it's expressed now are fine for most of Longmont, that I think that our two historic neighborhoods, even if one is much more vocal than the other, we have two, and they're both quite unique. It seems to me that it would not be inappropriate to make some special accommodations for transition zones around our historic neighborhoods. I am convinced, I see Polly grinning over there. I'm convinced that that we do need special accommodations. I think that the potential to overshadow the historic neighborhoods is in fact very real, and I don't think the concerns would be the same. You know, you don't see a residential neighborhood getting up in arms because they're going to get a Walmart. They're usually happy that they're going to get a Walmart. So this is a you know, a unique situation, and I think we should treat it. What?
I would just correct you that I would not be happy.
Oh, you would not be happy about the Walnut.
For the record, let the record state that the
Okay.
mayor does not want Walmart.
The mayor
in my
doesn't
backyard.
want a Walmart in his backyard. Okay, we got that. Okay. The other thing that I'm concerned about is that just putting affordable housing and sustainability as subsequent updates. I mean, I really, from my former life, understand the imperative to stay on a schedule and on a plan. But to me, adopting a plan that doesn't properly take into account these two really, really critical aspects of our new city design, but rather going back and making them additions onto the plan, just doesn't seem like the right approach. I mean, I would feel much better, in particular, if density and xeriscape was totally integral to the across-the-board land development code update. And I don't really have anything to question about that. Specifically, I wanted to have a specific example of why that was true, but I'm not enough of a city planner to come up with one, so I'm just stating it outright. But I still believe it. I really think that those redesigns of the code are going to be pervasive enough that we ought to do it once and for all, other than what will happen if we try to do an affordable housing patch is that it will get, we'll apply some principles to certain places and not maybe as broadly as they should be. And I really think it would be a smarter approach to roll them together. And lastly, I'm sure that the communication team that's coming up next month would have thought of this, but can't we just have a few mailing lists that people can sign up to get emails on? It wouldn't cost the city much at all to do that, and then we would lose forever the I'm not close enough to the notification zone, but I still care complaint. You know, I can sign myself up as caring anytime I want, regardless of whether I live on the north side or the south side.
Or just building off that, couldn't we just put it on a website, and then whenever it's updated, if you're on the list, the mailing list, you can get an email that says, you know, new development coming in. So anyway, just that's what I heard. All right, Mayor Pro Tem Christensen.
I've almost forgotten what I was going to mention. All right, so what I was originally going to mention is about the notification, which we changed when we changed the appeals process several years back. We also sort of changed the notification at the same time, and we also changed so that more things were administratively approved and didn't need a notification. So I think that's where a lot of people have fallen out of knowing when things are going to happen. But as part of that change, people were supposed to be able to sign up to say, okay, like Ruby Bowman, I don't live on the river, but I want to know if there's something going on at the river. And so as Councilwoman Martin said, just if we had a list, it makes sense that we could just have that list and have various lists of people who want to be notified for particular things. And maybe that's what Director Marsh was talking about, is creating a new mechanism for letting people know about that. That would be very helpful, I think, for everybody. As somebody's been trying to get affordable housing reintroduced for the last 4 years, I don't think it really has to do with the code. It's a very, very complex issue, and I don't know how you could put it into the code. I mean, I see how you could put different areas, maybe, but honestly, it's a strategy, and it has many different elements, and I don't know that, to me, that doesn't have very much to do with the code in many ways. So I don't really agree that we need to wait and insert affordable housing into the code, since we haven't, well, yeah. Anyway, that's just my opinion on that. So that was, I also agree with what Bonnie said about Councilman Finley said about parking lots, having teetered around many parking lots in the ice in the winter. The medians, which often, when it snows a lot, they fill up so much that you can't even see them if you're not a particularly great driver, and you just think that there isn't a median there, and you hit them. So I would not encourage there to be raised medians in parking lots. If people want walking paths or something, I don't really know what the purpose of them is, except to organize people for parking a lot. But perhaps there could be gravel or, as you say, drainage. Although those often get clogged up too. I've seen that, where the parking lot becomes a giant fish pond. And anyway, I agree with Councilman Finley about the median strips. They often are really a big hazard, and maybe we should rethink that. Thanks.
Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I have a couple of things. First of all, I do think that something in this code needs to refer to our affordable housing, because if we don't put it in the code, it could be changed too much. For example, if someone is doing affordable housing, I don't think that these landscaping standards should apply to them, and it needs to be spelled out. For example, the irrigation. That should be, let me go back. After reading these, it sounds pretty much like these were designed for a developer with an HOA who is going to be doing a specific development. If we are going to be actually incentivizing for affordable housing, we do need to have it in the codes, so that we do have smaller lot sizes, and they know that in the code that is accepted by the city council, that perhaps they don't need to have underground irrigation systems, or huge plots of land that are going to be irrigated for an HOA. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
So with respect to affordable housing zoning incentives, we currently have in our code, and we're planning to carry forward, incentives regarding reduction of lot sizes, reduction of lot widths, reduction of parking for affordable units. And we can certainly look at other incentives as well that would be applicable for affordable housing and help reduce those overall costs for those affordable housing projects.
So is that going to be like another section that you're bringing forward or an addendum? How is that going to work?
So Mayor Bagley and Councilmember Peck, so the Land Development Code will not be the conduit for all of the affordable housing language. So
Okay.
the program itself will not live in the Land Development Code. The requirement will, and any incentives will, but the actual programmatic pieces, cash in lieu or the other components that council decides, don't live in this section of the Land Development Code. So if, as we continue the discussion around affordable housing later in May and June, and we want to add additional incentives into the Land Development Code around, say, landscaping, we can certainly do that. Also, keep in mind that, so if we're going to have affordable housing included in a development itself, so someone's going to do a subdivision of 200 homes and they're going to do 10%, 20 units, those 20 units are going to be part of the same HOA as everyone else in that subdivision, so they are going to have, you know, common open space and landscape requirements as part of that broader development. So I think I just want to maybe better understand if council is looking for not having landscaping for developments or just not the affordable homes, because I think we also want to make sure there's equity around the aesthetic of a neighborhood, and certainly xeriscape and irrigation standards are things that we can vary, but I just want to make sure we're 100% understanding what you're getting at with additional incentives and the program and where it lives.
I guess just jump in real quick, and then we're going to go to Councilman Waters. I agree, but my concern would be removing, the word you used was equity in aesthetics? I guess at some point when you make it so small and so compact and so a decrease in landscaping, you reach a point where your affordable housing becomes a ghetto or a slum so I mean, there's probably a fine line between giving Mr. Mulshine here in the audience an incentive and then also reaching a point where, you know, another developer might choose to build something that's aesthetically, it's a cardboard box that I think that would enhance crime. It would enhance insecurities, economic, what was the term you always use, Councilmember Martin? Economic segregation, yes. So I would just be, yes, but to a point, I guess is what my thoughts would be. Councilmember Waters?
I had two more things.
Oh, sorry, I lied.
Do you have to wait, Councilman?
Yes, no, go ahead. Councilmember Peck, continue.
I also
We'll get you next.
agree with Councilwoman Martin about the transition zones in that I know that we have transition zones, but I'm not sure they should be universal for the whole city. We need to designate and actually protect our special areas, which are the historical areas. That's what makes a city different. So we need to make sure that we respect the differences in our city and protect them. And I do think historical areas are part of it. For me, the transition zones are about commerce. And we have from the 9th, as I've said before, all the way down to the 23rd, South Main. We have complete zones where we can build those things and have transition zones there so that we can accommodate new apartments, et cetera. But I do think we need to protect our historic areas. And then one other thing, and this could be the same idea about the affordable housing when I'm looking at the prairie dog removal. Is this the way it's going to be in here now, or are we going to bring back the prairie dog removal aspect that City Council has yet to discuss, because this is pretty broad? And
Mayor Bagley and Councilmember Peck, so that section will go away, and the new prairie dog ordinance will be brought forward, and that will be adopted, I believe, actually as part of Section 9 of the Longmont Municipal Code. It will no longer be in the Land Development Code section. So this is just, while we transition between the two, we still have to keep something.
My apologies for cutting you off. That it, Councilmember Peck? Anything else? Okay. Dr. Waters?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. So just on this issue of numbers of trees and landscaping and that kind of thing, as I listen to the conversation and as I've had some input from the community, it just seems there are times where the code kind of comes up against what doesn't make sense, which is I think what you were trying to get at. And I worked with a CEO once upon a time who put up on a wall in his organization a big piece of butcher paper with pens hanging down, and it had said, "This makes no sense," and asked his staff every time they bumped into something that made no sense to go make a note of it. And 6 months later, they had what they call their wall of shame. And they systematically addressed everything that didn't make sense in the interest of sense making. And when we have a code for, I mean, the worst thing we could do is to build austere developments, create austere developments for low-income citizens. That would be reprehensible. But to force something that doesn't make sense and drives up their costs is equally as mindless. So somehow there ought to be some provision for when it doesn't make sense, let's just acknowledge that and create the kind of, if flexibility, which is what I heard is one of the reasons we're doing this, if flexibility is one of the principles, how do we design in enough flexibility so that a landscape architect doesn't drive something that makes no sense to the developer or the home buyer, right? Number one. I have a few more, so give me a few minutes.
Can we, before you, how would we do that?
I don't want to micromanage it. It just
No. Just. I mean, can you think about it?
Yeah, we can think about it off the top of my head right at this
Okay,
moment.
all right.
There's a lot of different pieces that you're all suggesting that are not the things that we've done. So we're happy to rethink all those things, but maybe not right.
Well,
this
flexibility
minute.
was good. That's what I heard. Right.
So secondly, the idea of proximity to development on public lands and creating a system for notifying the community that, Brian, you used the term impact. I'm not certain developing adjacent to public lands has an impact in my neighborhood, but there is an interest in my neighborhood of what happens there. So regardless of impact, if there's an interest in the community, then I support, what I've heard already. I also am sympathetic to what I've heard about our historic preservation, our historic districts and preserving. You talked about commerce, and what occurs to me is character, that we have an obligation to protect the character of those neighborhoods, and I'm sympathetic to those concerns, and personally, I'm going to want to see those concerns reflected in whatever the final draft is that I would support. I would like to know, this is really a question, to what degree, and maybe this is a percentage that you would put this into a percentage, to what degree do the recommendations that we've seen that are posted reflect our sustainability plan? Are all those standards congruent with our sustainability plan, or are there elements of the code that would be conflicted? Because as we're talking about affordable housing, I wouldn't want to have to go back and do a redo or patch something or fix something that we could get right the first time if there's incongruence there.
I mean, I certainly think that there's certain aspects of the code update that are consistent with the sustainability plan. Looking at more compact development, more efficient use of infrastructure, allowing additional density, allowing additional building height where it's appropriate. I think those are things that were discussed, I think, between as part of the Envision process update. And I know that there's other aspects of the sustainability plan that apply more towards the public realm. And as I mentioned, those are some of those areas that we'll be looking at as part of our update to our design standards and construction specifications in terms of zero-scape design or just more efficient use of our resources for infrastructure and appropriate design for infrastructure. And so the Land Development Code is one component in terms of recommendations from the sustainability plan, but there's another component that's not directly related to the Land Development Code, where there's other recommendations that affect other areas of the municipal code that are related to sustainability. Another example would be this year we're looking at transitioning from the 2015 building codes to the 2018 building codes. And as part of that, a component of that is looking at sustainable practices with respect to those building code updates.
Was that 90%?
Oh.
Or 100%?
Yeah, no, I'm not sure if
I don't need to put you, so just keep that in mind.
I mean, I'm just thinking about goals and policies, strategies with respect to the sustainability plan and recommendations relative to the land development code. It may be half, it may be less than that. I don't know. Aaron, if you want to jump in.
Just because I can't help myself. Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Waters, I think it's really important when we talk about the sustainability plan that we're really talking about the sustainability plan and Envision Longmont in concert, because that's exactly how they're meant to be taken. The sustainability plan really does focus on those more near-term 5 to 10-year actions, while Envision Longmont is longer term. But at the heart of Envision Longmont, our main purpose is how do we make Longmont more sustainable and more resilient? And so where Envision Longmont talks more about developing the community and land use strategies, the sustainability plan talks more about specific things with utilities and our food system, a little bit more with buildings and infrastructure, but really those two plans go together. And so I think that there's definitely some more work to be done. Brian mentioned some of the things that we've talked with primarily Public Works and Natural Resources on. Once we have better standards in place for example, public infrastructure and public spaces, we'll be able to translate some of that to the development code for private land development. But I would say that I wouldn't put a percentage on it because I don't know that it's that type of answer. I know that's what you're asking for, but I don't know that that's the type of answer that's appropriate. I think that it's a fair percentage. We've made a lot of strides with creating more mixed-use compact development, more walkability, which gives, that's one example. It gives the ability for people potentially not to have to drive, which can improve air and water quality. And all those things show up in the sustainability plan as well as Envision. And so is it 100%? Probably not, but we've made a lot of strides. We've worked closely with the sustainability coordinator and her staff on reviewing the code. She's made some recommendations. I think Sherry Malloy talked specifically about one of the trash recycling and compost additions that we've made to the code. So there's things like that throughout, and we flagged a number of things that we think in the future we can make even more improvements to make Longmont more sustainable. So it's kind of a look at it as a big picture with both plans.
Good. Just two more. I don't know if they're quick. Will we be dealing with the river and streams section in May in terms of an action?
No, the riparian streams, wetlands, setback, as well as the species and habitat protection sections, those will be after May.
Okay.
Those will be a subsequent amendment discussion that we'll have.
All right. So then here would be my last question, and I should have thought to ask this before tonight. So, and this is just my ignorance coming out again. When a developer's going through the process of they've submitted a proposal or an application, and they're going through the process with our planning staff, there's a point in time in which they're going to pay their fee once the project is approved. You can tell me how that process works or at what point they're paying the fee. So what are the implications of having the developer pay the cost of that phase of the development and then paying the rest of their fee before they get a certificate of occupancy, even if they pay a premium to delay the second part of that payment, where they don't have to carry their capital and the cost of that for however many months or years it would be, and on the backside, pay 1% or 2% more than they might have paid on the front end, saves them money and makes money for us. It just distributes the payment on a different schedule. What are the implications of that? Is that crazy? Does that break the city?
Mayor Bagley and Councilmember Waters, so certainly not. So we have had this discussion on 2 occasions in my tenure here at the city about doing what's called fee deferral. So that's the simple way to talk about what we would do is defer payment of typically the impact fees that are paid at building permit until certificate of occupancy. And that has just a few challenges on the administrative side, and I think it also has some challenges that I would let Jim speak to in terms of when we collect revenue for capital things. So that includes our park fee, our transportation fee, and our rec fee. So think of a certificate of occupancy coming 9 months after you get a permit, and so that would really shift all of our revenue collection to a different fiscal year potentially, and just change that cycle. It has some back-end system things that I won't go into that I think are potentially surmountable with a little staff time and ingenuity. And then we also have fees that are paid at a development application, and those are relatively small compared to a building permit fee. They're a few $1,000s as opposed to tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on commercial or residential.
Well, I just wonder if an approach like that, in the interest of affordable housing, becomes part of an incentive as well.
Sure, and I think if that's something that council wants to bring forward, as I said, we had this conversation, I believe, in 2009. Maybe Councilmember Finley was here last time we'd had that discussion. So yeah, I think we can address how that could work and what that might look like, and that gives me a good head start.
I think it'd be worth considering.
We've heard that from the developers, so yeah. Harold, do you have something?
And I think what we're going to say is that type of conversation is not necessarily a land development code item. It is a different code item. And so one of the things I was going to say about the land development code requires the affordable housing as part of the land development code. But when you create your overall affordable housing program, there will be components of that affordable housing program that have nothing to do with the land development code, but will be in a separate ordinance by itself. And so here's the timing issue coming into play, because if you wait on putting some of those with the affordable housing piece in the land development code, how is it working in concert with the broader affordable housing program that comes into play? And so let's say theoretically, we're bringing that back to you. You had the memo from Kathy and Karen, and we say, here's the program we want to put in play. We will be adjusting ordinances in multiple locations based on that program. Let's say we get a year from now and we go, okay, this piece didn't work and we need to change it, or this piece didn't work. We may potentially be changing the land development code for those pieces that are in there that don't work. And so I think of this in terms of this program as something that touches many areas of our code structure. The land development code is only one piece of that broader touch. And so that's one aspect that comes into play. The other thing that comes into play in this is that when you look at the land development code, a lot of the things related to sustainability and some of these other perspectives actually come into into our design standards. And our design standards are a different piece of the puzzle associated with the land development code. And in some cases, it's actually our design standards where a lot of the dollars start coming into play. And that's a piece that we want to look at as well, and we need to go over. That'll be connected to the sustainability plan, the affordable housing conversation, in terms of what we bring into the design standards component of this. And then the thing is what I would say is we can look at that in terms of the permit fees. There also will be permit fees where you'll hear us say those need to be all up front, and specifically those are things associated with the public improvement plans, because that's where they're having to put in water lines, sewer lines, and streets. And we have had occasions where we've actually had to come in and finish the work because it wasn't done. So it's something we can look at tactically, but I think to say it's something we could apply to the broader scope, each function is going to have its own issue.
Thanks.
Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. City manager said a word that I think probably I've been groping for, which is design standards. 2 points about that. First, if we have design standards that express the aesthetic of our city, is that kind of what we're looking for? Because if we express the things we want our city to, the properties that we want our city to have, so that when you walk through it, it's a beautiful thing. You know, that's true of Phoenix and it's true of Columbus, but the aesthetics aren't the same. And one of the things that I think we're looking for here is the idea that Longmont needs to have a more forward-looking aesthetic than what's expressed in things like how many trees per square acre, or square acre, per acre, a residential development has. We need to express the aesthetic in ways that are consistent with a changing climate, a changing density, and everything that goes along with that. Changes in technology, how much parking area we need. Well, I personally believe that the amount of parking we need is going to turn down pretty soon, very soon. And so we don't want to force an aesthetic that assumes, as I know our traffic engineers tend to assume right now, that the number of vehicles is going to continue to increase at least linearly with the population. Well, it's not. But to get out of the rat hole, I think we're talking about. I think it's understood that we're all talking about the portions of land development code that affect affordable housing standards as opposed to the entire affordable housing code. But I think we may be falling into a trap of talking about the inclusionary housing portion of it versus everything else. And one of the main things that we've been talking about, and the thing that I'm happiest about what we've been talking about, is the idea that if the land use codes in particular allowed it, there could be affordable housing that is built under market regulations and standards and practices, but that is still in the 80% to 100% AMI or 110% AMI, that doesn't have to have special treatment and is not subsidized. And we especially want to make sure that there are categories in our codes for that. And certainly they would be the same aesthetic, the same design standards, everything like that would apply, although there could be exceptions, there could be adjustments, but you wouldn't want to, the city is going to look all of a piece as you go from one neighborhood to another. And, if you go back east to cities that have been being cities for a lot longer than we've been being a city, you can see that in some cities. Washington, D.C. has that property. St. Louis does not, doesn't at all. It's very jarring to walk around St. Louis in places. So I think that's what we're trying to get at is that we don't want to think of it as either or, we've got the low rent neighborhoods and we've got everything else. We want to have a transition there too, but where we have a unified aesthetic and that we've done the math in advance in terms of the land use codes.
Councilmember Finley.
That's kind of what I was going to say. Only I was going to say it a little differently. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Well,
Mayor Pro Tem Christensen.
No.
Oh, you want your
I do think that what I was trying to say was not that we could just have reduced landscaping for affordable housing. I'm saying that we can have a landscape plan done by a landscape architect that doesn't include 75% coverage of the ground in grass that's irrigated. There are beautiful zero-scaped plans that are done for $1 million houses as well. And I think flexibility, as Councilmember Waters said, is the key. If a development comes in and they have a beautiful landscape plan, that doesn't have exactly how many trees and how many bushes on each lot, I think it should be considered. And I don't think it should be an exception. And I think it could, if we build flexibility in our code, that can be done. That was what I was going to say.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, I agree that we need some flexibility, but the whole point of a code is so that we have some base standards, so that we need to have those basic standards. And I'd like to point out that, well, I also would like to give a shout out to the east side. The west side is quieter. We're more like hermits. Maybe we're just lazy, but, you know, God bless the east side because they are much more articulate and they rally themselves. And they are also, it's in some sense, they're smaller and they're more impacted because downtown is veering towards that part more than to the west side. So I want to thank you for speaking out. We've talked a lot about the landscape, and I think people don't seem to, well, what people like about the east side and the west side is that they have trees. They have what's called a detached sidewalk, or, as I call it, the hell strip. But that's where people play. I mean, that's where we can experiment with xeriscapic stuff. That's what I did. And then I planted it all through my house, or through my yard. It's a place where kids can play on the sidewalk because they're sheltered. It creates a neighborhood. Developers would like to eliminate that because they get more bang for their buck, but I don't want to eliminate that. And if you have a tree in front, that shades your house. I don't have air conditioning. I have some big trees, and that's my air conditioning. And so
trees.
I am a tree. I used to sit in the trees a lot. Anyway, so the trees are not just an annoyance and an expense. By the way, the ones in the hell strip are taken care of by the city, so it doesn't cost the homeowner anything. And it really is an amenity, just like the river. We can't commodify every single thing. We can't commodify our trees and nature and the river and all these things and say, well, they're just in the way, you know, because they actually do have an economic value. I don't pay as much on utilities because I don't have as many utilities. I live in a small house and I don't have air conditioning. It saves me a lot of money. When people don't have to commute and they have walkable neighborhoods, that saves some people $9,000 to $12,000 for a car every year. It really does have economic value. And people do come to this town because of the river. We need to protect the river because nobody comes to Longmont because they say, wow, there are a lot of 4-story dense buildings here with all kinds of apartments. No, they come because they can walk along the river and they can relax. So it has an economic value even if we don't give it one. So just a word about design. To me, design, having spent my life in design for 50 years, design is really, the design standards are not so much about aesthetics. Design is really about analysis and problem solving and fitting into an economic sustainability. I mean, any commercial project that I've ever done, first of all, it's got to be economically possible for the client, but it also has to, you have to analyze what the purpose is and how you're going to accomplish this, what the competition is, that sort of thing. So in a sense, design, our design standards have to do with how things fit into the city. It's not necessarily a Longmont aesthetic, although if you look around, there are some quirky little things that exist in Longmont that are our vernacular architecture. But so when we think about the design standards, it's also a baseline, just like the code. This is something we won't fall below. We don't want to have, 15-foot wide lots. And we also don't want to have people building towers in the middle of a residential neighborhood just because they want to. So, what else was I going to say? I do think that, no, I'm not going to comment about that. Never mind. Never mind. That's all I have to say right now.
All right, great. Looks like we have one more comment. Councilmember Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I just would like to say I don't oppose trees, and I I don't. Yeah, we all love trees. It's just it's not the expense of planting them. I think that we need to be realistic about having enough water for growing big trees in the future. And when we are suggesting, as all of us have at one point or another in this discussion, putting some constraints on future development, it's more in a sense of realism. We are a landlocked city in a way. We aren't going to have the space, and we're not going to have the water per capita that we enjoyed in the past. And I think that that's what everybody's driving toward, is how do we build a beautiful city within those constraints? And some of the constraints just don't appear to be there yet. I think that's what we're all saying.
All right, great. And I guess the only comment I'd have is that by no means do I want to detract from the historic East Side. And I hear what they want, and I get that. The only comment I'd like to make is just that my home's special too. And in my profession, I have the unique, whether it's bankruptcy, divorce, it doesn't matter what the reason. No one, I cannot think of one single exception that somebody goes, you know what, fine, I'll give up my home. Even if they have the money to sell their home and get out of it and move into another one, no one ever wants to move or change their home. Because where they live that's where their family is. They love it. It's special. And I certainly respect and admire the character of the historic East Side and the historic West Side. But I think that, I mean, if you look at any of the neighborhoods in Ward 3 or any of the neighborhoods in Ward 1, you could go to those neighborhoods and you could ask, what do you think of your neighborhood? They'd say, we love it. It's got a fantastic character. Well, maybe not everybody, but for the most part, everybody. And I think that, I was just having a conversation today with my realtor, and he says, you won't believe it. There was a 820 square foot home in the historic East Side that just sold for $484,000. And my what was that? Yeah. And I was like, no way. Who would buy that junk over there? Now granted, I'm not ripping on the historic East Side, but I can, man. Because, you guys love it over there. I'd never live there, but if you're going to come to me and say, hey, look, I'd, whether it's in the historic East Side or whether it's in Ward 1 or in Ward 3, you want to build a massive behemoth of a building that doesn't fit the character of my neighborhood, I think anybody is going to kind of have a problem with that. So I'm not detracting from what Paula Fitzgerald and her neighbors are saying. I'm just saying we're all special. And I think that whatever we wind up doing with the code should address, just pretend that every neighborhood, what is it? It's a cute little neighborhood in Ward 1, the Kensington? Is it Kensington? It's a beautiful little neighborhood, right? Not historic East Side material, but beautiful and wonderful in its own way, that they'd have the same problem and same issues. So I just, as I'm hearing the residents of the historic East Side talk, really what I'm saying is I'm pretending that all neighborhoods are speaking, and I think we need to make sure that we address everybody's concerns. That's it. So, all right, let's go ahead and move on to mayor and council comments. Mayor Pro Tem, you got in first.
The first thing is that we have some information. Sorry. The first thing is that I'd like to comment on the information that we got in the back on modeling, and the next steps for inclusionary housing program. We first started talking about January 25th, then we talked about it March 5th. Now we're going to talk about it again as soon as possible, because the developers need to know what's happening so that they can do it. And it's just phase one of an affordable housing, trying to address affordable housing. So the sooner the better. Thank you. Secondly, on a trivial note, I have gone through phase 3 of my bakery tour. So I went to the Bavarian Bakery and had almond custard tart and a baklava. And I've heard from my friend Mary that they also have a lovely strudel.
Where was this?
The Bavarian Bakery.
Where's that located?
Off Pratt. Ken Pratt. Yeah. Secondly, I went to Cheese Importers and had a eclair stuffed with chocolate hazelnut custard and raspberry framboise cake.
Where was that?
Cheese Importers.
Okay.
So I highly recommend everybody take the bakery tour. Third, I'd like to give a quote from Martin Luther King. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. Whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward.
Councilmember Finley.
I just wanted to mention once again, I have tickets in my hand here to the Ed Green Scholarship Dinner this Friday night. They're only $10 per person, 3 or more for $25. It's a lot of fun, and the money is used to send kids back and forth from Longmont to our sister cities, Ciudad Guzman and Chino. So it's a lot of fun. There's good food there, too. Tamales. There's beef tamales. If you'd like a ticket, I have them, and I'd love to sell you one.
Just the only comment I have is, could we work on fixing these mics? Every week, and I always forget. That's why I'm doing it now. We have got, I don't know if they're under warranty or they're terrible. And then, so plan A would be swap them out so that we don't, I mean, like I'm bending over right now. Like literally my lower back hurts from lowing over. And then, and the other option is plan B is lengthen these cords so that we can actually, at least get back. So we're not like this all night.
Mayor Bagley, members of council, we have ordered a pilot of longer ones that supposedly have a little better sound to them. So we're going to try those out for 30 days and we'll see how they do. And if
Awesome.
they work, then we'll purchase them.
All right. Front page above the fold, right, Mr. Fryer? Council to replace microphones. All right. City manager, any remarks?
Based on the last conversation, I do have a couple. One thing I didn't get to touch on is we are going to look at the technology solution on the notification. We know we can port the emails in. What we've got to figure out is if the interface between when, let's say, Brian has to put in a project on the map, is there a way to interface it where if it's changed, it sends? We've got to look at those technical pieces. The other thing that I've asked Joni to do is that we need to set up some meetings with council to go over the land development code probably and with you all individually just to go through different things. We heard a lot of different things tonight, and we want to be able to zero in on this and have that conversation with you all. And then that will allow us to go more in depth in terms of here's development standards, here's the land development code, and here's how they interface. So if council is amenable to that, Joni and her staff will be working with you all and setting up those meeting times.
Or maybe a Friday.
We could.
So,
we
anyway,
could do
just
that
an
on
idea.
a Friday too.
Yeah.
Schedule is changing with some of these comments, so it's going to move.
Right. All right, city attorney. Watch, observe. People on Channel 8, watch this.
No comments, Mayor.
Genius. We're adjourned.